Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, August the 8th, 2024. Yesterday I talked about Kamala Harris's VP pick, Tim Walz. I didn't go into it in great detail, and I think I should return to the subject. And I particularly want to consider the rough time when she announced her pick, and I think that is an important time. It is the beginning, and I think it is useful to just look at the astrology for that announcement. Was it the right time? I don't know. I mean, Mercury was retrograde, but on the other hand, it was just after a new moon. It's always good to start things just after a new moon. The sun was in Leo, the moon had just moved into Virgo, so maybe that wasn't so bad. So I want to consider that time for her announcement. I also want to consider the relationship between her and some of the other candidates. It's been said that the reason that Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz was because she felt comfortable with him. And, for example, she didn't feel quite so comfortable with, for example, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, or Mark Kelly. I think he's a senator from Arizona. So there is a personal aspect to it that we also need to consider. Now, there's another thing going on which I kind of forgot to mention, and that is the fact that yesterday, August the 7th, we had the halfway point between the solstice and the equinox, the exact halfway point. And that's something that astrologers don't tend to focus on. And I do think it is important because it does arguably set up the next 6 weeks. And so what I want to do is look at the precise moment the sun was at 15 degrees Leo. That's halfway between 0 Cancer and 0 Libra. So I want to look at that halfway point and set up a chart for that exact timing and just see what it tells us. Maybe reset it to particular locations. For example, Chicago, because I think Chicago does matter, because remember, August the 19th, we've got the Democrat National Convention starting August the 19th. And I do think that's very much something we need to focus on. My working hypothesis at the moment is that Harris is going to be sort of looking good in the polls. People are going to be excited about her more concerns with the Republican campaign, and this will just continue until August the 19th. I think August the 19th may see an important change in American politics. I mean, I've discussed this before because it relates to the fact that we've got a full moon on August the 19th. So anyway, let's look at this sort of equinox solstice chart, that halfway chart, because I do think that this chart could be very important. Now, I do want to remind you that if you happen to like this video, I would really appreciate it if you would to just indicate the fact that you do like it, because likes do matter in terms of this channel. And also what matters in terms of this channel is subscribers. And if you're not subscribed to this channel and you happen to enjoy this video, I would be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe, because it doesn't cost you anything, but it does make a big difference. But okay, so let's look at what's happening today first, the astrology and the I Ching for Thursday, August the 8th. So there, of course, is Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I'll try not to repeat myself over stuff I talked about yesterday, but I do feel I need to talk about them one more time. I'll probably talk about them more from one more time. But okay, so right now, this is noon, New York, and you can see that the moon is at 3 degrees 11 minutes Libra. So on Thursday, the moon moves into Libra at 10:31 a.m. London time, which is pretty early in the morning in the Americas. So, if you're in the Americas, you've got a moon in Libra day. If you're in Europe, most of the day is going to have moon in Libra. If you are in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand, then moon is not going to move into Libra until this evening. So perhaps for you, you can regard it as a moon in Virgo day. Now, the moon, before it moves into Libra, does make a trine aspect to Uranus. And it actually makes an opposition to Neptune. So you're going to pick up on that, especially if you're in Australia and New Zealand and East Asia. So there could be, with moon in Virgo, trine Uranus, there may be a sense of excitement, maybe, the pace of things moving quite quickly, but maybe not quite knowing where they're going. That moon opposition Neptune could be a little difficult. There could be a certain air of confusion and feelings getting a little bit mixed up. But when the moon moves into Libra, it makes a trine to Pluto. And that is a different kind of energy. I know it's moon trine Pluto, and one thinks about sort of emotional intensity and that kind of thing, but it's moon in Libra. It's not in Scorpio or some other intense sign like sort of Cancer, emotional. It's not so emotional, that moon trine Pluto, because it's in Libra. And I suppose moon in Libra is about the balance, isn't it? It's about how we relate to other people. Where is the power? And I think that many of us are going to want to be assertive, and we're going to want to be in control. And perhaps we're going to try to assert this control through the power of our words, or through our mind, through manipulations which are not really, really deep, that we've worked out logically. And while this is going on, Mercury is making a conjunction to Venus, and we've got what we've got Mercury moving retrograde in early Virgo, Venus moving forward, and they come together. And the Mercury-Venus conjunction, I would have said, was pretty fortunate. It's a very talented conjunction. Mercury-Venus as a pair is about art and creativity. It's about being able to communicate what we're good at, and it's just about being able to create things. And it can also be about business, particularly in Virgo. I suppose with Mercury conjunct Venus in Virgo, it's not enough to create a sculptor. You've got to sell the sculpture, maybe. That might be one way of looking at the Mercury conjunct Venus. So, do tell people what you're good at with Mercury conjunct Venus in Virgo. And at the same time, don't be sloppy about it, because it's Mercury conjunct Venus in Virgo. So you have to be very clear about sort of why what you're good at really is important. So, for example, if you're, applying for a job, or if you've got an interview, it's going to be very important that you explain why you're so wonderful, whether it's face-to-face in terms of what you say, but in terms of your resume, your CV. That all is going to be important, but you really can do it. And just by focusing on the details, and also, I suppose, the results, because it is Virgo, an earth sign. So results do matter with Mercury, with that Mercury conjunct Venus. And also, in general, Mercury conjunct Venus it's nice and communicative. We can talk very easily, and we can tell people what's on our mind, and just conversation will be easy, particularly if that conversation has got a clear subject matter. That's how Virgo likes it. Virgo wants to have a point, and wants to feel that it's moving towards something, perhaps in an analytical kind of way. And so, that's the Mercury-Venus conjunction. And that is perhaps the main thing, the main events going on geocentrically. Turning to the heliocentric view, the heliocentric view is pretty unchanged compared with yesterday. I mean, still the main aspect remains the Venus opposition Neptune. That Venus opposition Neptune, it's still there. It was exact yesterday, but the message does remain the same with Venus opposition Neptune. We just have to make sure that we don't get confused. I suppose it comes at the same time as geocentrically we've got Moon opposition Neptune, so heliocentrically Venus opposition Neptune, so messages could get mixed. We could get the wrong impression about other people. We can think we understand them, perhaps jump to conclusions, but maybe our emotional senses have got things wrong, and so that's where we might need a bit of caution. And the Venus opposition Neptune might have a certain relationship to money and what we spend our money on. And with Venus opposition Neptune, we might not be quite sure what's going on with money. So it might actually be a good idea to be careful and, the usual advice, don't spend money if it's not absolutely necessary. And this Venus is about to change signs into Libra. Obviously, this is heliocentric Libra. So Venus moves into heliocentric Libra and it makes a trine to Pluto. And I suppose we might be already starting to feel that Venus trine Pluto. And again, it's similar to the geocentric Moon trine Pluto that we've got. So with Venus trine Pluto over the next couple of days, that indicates that relationships can be quite fulfilling and transformative, but I don't see that aspect as being too much of a problem. And in fact, because it's a heliocentric aspect, we might not feel it at all. Okay, that's the broad picture. And now I want to look at what's happening today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for today, which is Thursday, August the 8th, 2024. Aries. There has been a bit of a change, or should I say that there is a change going on as we speak. The moon is moving into Libra. The moon has been in Virgo, now it's moving into Libra, and if you're an Aries, I think that you very much feel that. On one level, there are perhaps fewer complications. There were things that you've been trying to work out, and it may have been just difficult to just in general, just to be yourself. I mean, that's what you wanted to be, just to be yourself, perhaps be a spontaneous Aries, but there was just a lot of stuff that you had to deal with, annoying stuff that was slowing you down. And I think with Moon in Libra, the sign change itself, regardless of what sign the moon moves into, is useful. It just means you feel that something's changed, and things that you were worrying about yesterday, you don't have to worry about today. And there's a greater sense that you are able to create change. Before, you wanted to create change, you wanted to make things happen, but it was just hard work. But now it's just easier. You can see the possibilities. And I suppose part of the key to creating change, part of the key to having an impact is just understanding where other people stand. Because if you don't understand where other people are and what they're thinking, then it's very, very difficult to take successful initiatives, because you are to an extent reliant on someone's particular way of looking at the world. So if you take a little bit of time to just understand what's happening and to sort of understand why people are what they are, it will just make things a lot easier. Now, that does mean that you shouldn't be in too much of a hurry. Take the time to just observe and to just feel and to respond. And soon enough, things will start becoming clearer. And socially, I should say that your skills are pretty good at the moment. I think that you know what brings people together, you know how to bring people together, and you'll just naturally be able to create connections. And so, do work on your social life and just see what people have to say, try to understand them, and that gives you power and it gives you strength. And it's just important that you know where to stop. You have to sort of get into other people's world, understand other people's world, and demonstrate that you are sympathetic and responsive, but only up to a point. You have to ask why you're doing what you're doing. The reason you are being accommodating, the reason you are trying to understand what makes people tick, the reason you're doing all that is actually so that you can be in a better position to take your own initiatives. Because clearly, if you take your own initiatives without understanding the social environment, these initiatives are unlikely to work. On the other hand, if you go in the other direction, you completely focus on other people's demands, then you're not going to be able to get anything done. So you have to gather the information you need, understand who you're working with. I suppose it's all about understanding the social material. And once you've understood the social material, then you will be in a position to actually make things happen. And actually, I would really caution you against going too deeply into other people's private worlds. Yeah, you have to go in a little bit just to make sure that you're in control. But if you go in too deeply, you really try to understand someone's psychology going all the way, then it's different. Then things could actually get a bit messy. And you don't want to get overwhelmed by other people's psychological depths, because you might start hitting things that you just simply don't want to deal with. Okay, you might deal with them, but it's just going to waste a lot of time, at least, if you're lucky. So it's just important, Aries, that you do know when to stop. A bit of understanding, a bit of compassion, a bit of empathy goes a long way. But too much empathy, and you could actually lose the plot. Taurus, you are perhaps in a little bit of a hurry for some reason. You seem to just want everything to happen at once, which is not entirely natural for a Taurus. I mean, Taurus is a fixed sign. Taurus likes to, I suppose, do things at its own pace, and just being in too much of a hurry, well, it's almost rather indecent, isn't it? And there is a question, are you actually going to achieve anything? But still, there's something about Taurus at the moment which is looking for results and doesn't want to wait, doesn't really want to ask questions, and if you want to do something, you might just do it and not actually think about the preparations. Again, that's not typical Taurean behavior. So there is some danger then, Taurus, that you go stumbling on without thinking it through, and you could just get yourself into trouble, or you could have a literal or metaphorical accident. And so if you're doing anything that is at all dangerous, just hold back. You are probably a little more accident prone than usual, and you could get yourself into arguments quite easily. Maybe arguments about nothing in particular, but I think there could be times when you are quick to anger. On the other hand, I don't want to sort of obsess about that. The most important aspect, after all, today is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus. And this conjunction between Mercury and Venus is entirely fortunate, I would have said. I know Venus is in Virgo. Venus, perhaps in Virgo, doesn't work as well as it should, because Venus is in it's fallen in Virgo. Yet, it is conjunct Mercury. And that Venus conjunct Mercury gives you intelligence, it makes you quite insightful, and I think you'll be able to understand things very quickly, and at the same time your conversational skills will actually be very good, particularly if they've got a focus. I'm not necessarily talking about just idle small talk. No, when you're talking about things that are useful and particularly practical, when you're discussing, I don't know, whether it's money or business or maybe how to fix something, I don't know, discussing the minutiae of something technical, I think you'll just do a very good job of it, and people are really going to understand you, and you will understand them, and it is a great time to really show the world what you can do, and don't doubt yourself. And you'll find that maybe there is something you doubt yourself over. You're not absolutely 100% sure that you know what you're doing. You're not 100% sure that you've got the requisite level of talent. But as soon as you start talking about it, you'll then realize that you know a lot, and that you really have got the skills that you perhaps doubted. So through conversation maybe comes self-confidence. And sometimes just talking something through can just make all the difference. Even if a person you're talking to isn't really listening, you can still benefit from this process of talking it through. And so I think that could be very useful. So at the same time, it's just going to matter, Taurus, that you concentrate on things that you understand, that don't have a particularly speculative nature. You're not going to be in the mood for just talking about stuff that's of a fantastic nature, that is speculative. You might at the very least regard it as being a waste of time, but you could just so easily get just completely confused, especially as Venus, which is your ruler, is, from a heliocentric point of view, Venus is making an opposition to Neptune. And so, this opposition to Neptune has been going on for a couple of days, but this Venus opposition Neptune could just be confusing. And if you find that other people are being confusing, if other people are saying things that you don't understand, it's easy to think that you're at fault, that somehow you're the one who's stupid, you're the one who doesn't know enough. But no, if someone is saying something that you don't understand, that's a warning sign. It's got nothing to do with your knowledge and your intelligence. It may be that this other person doesn't actually know what they're talking about. If someone knows what they're talking about, you'll understand what they're talking about. So that might be a good test of other people's credibility. If anyone's talking over your head, you don't know what they're talking about, then just walk away, I would have said, or tell them to shut up, or tell them to clarify. And if they can't clarify, then that really is a sure sign that something is wrong. So Taurus, trust yourself and trust your intellect and trust your knowledge, because right now you're the one with the knowledge, and your brain is, I think, on very good form. Gemini, you're feeling a little bit better today. I think that over the last couple of days, you've been a bit overwhelmed by perhaps annoying little details. There's perhaps things been going on at home which have taken up a lot of your time. I mean, I know it's Thursday, but it still might feel that there's stuff remaining from the weekend having to deal with, but you still have to deal with maybe things that perhaps have maybe a sort of family nature relating to your home. There's still a lot of attention there, a lot of things that you have to deal with there in terms of your home, if you're honest with yourself. But you don't want it to go too far. And right now you're just feeling a certain sense of relief, perhaps, that you've disengaged yourself from, I won't say a complicated situation, but an annoying situation that just required rather too much of your focus. And now I think, Gemini, you can not just start to breathe. I mean, the moon is in an air sign now. The moon is moving into Libra. That's the air sign. You can breathe and you can be yourself. And I think that you can start to spend time on things that you enjoy doing. And I think that there's also plenty of inspiration available, because we've got the moon is making a trine to Pluto. And that trine to Pluto is probably pretty useful, because the moon trine Pluto is going to give you access to things which are perhaps outside your normal experience. And by getting in touch with things which you don't normally get involved with, you can start to see a new and perhaps transforming side of the world. So, don't be satisfied with the way things are. Consider how they actually could be with that moon trine Pluto. And don't underestimate yourself, and don't underestimate how you can express yourself and communicate, because today there is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus. Mercury might be retrograde, going backwards, so you're having to go back over old ground, perhaps some of your ideas having to go back over old ground. But Mercury is still in Virgo, a sign where it is very strong, and Mercury is conjunct Venus. And so with Mercury conjunct Venus, this actually is very sociable. It allows you to communicate your ideas very effectively, but it has to be on your terms. You don't have to do it on other people's terms, but you can express your ideas. Okay, you might want to just write about your ideas, but you can tell people about your ideas, and you can tell people what's important to you. And I think, Gemini, you're going to sound very convincing. And it may actually go further than that, because right now I do think that Geminis have a certain amount of charisma. It may not be obvious charisma, but there's something about you that brings people in your direction. They find that there's something rather interesting about you, and you can perhaps give the impression that you really do have something to offer. And so, Gemini, you might want to take advantage of this facility. If there are people you want to get closer to people you want to meet, people you want to interact with, perhaps over the last few days you just didn't think it was possible, I think now you can actually do it. So don't doubt yourself in terms of your social skills. Cancer, you are in a position where you're feeling that you do need to just stop and take account of everything that's been happening recently. And in the first instance, you're not particularly in the mood for doing anything special or spectacular. I think that you feel that you want to play it safe. Why take a risk? Why do something you've never done before? Anything can happen. And so it just might feel that it is just better to, maybe stay in one place, not to do anything that requires a huge amount of social processing. And I think that there is a sense in which your caution may be justified, but the problem might be that if you try too hard to avoid complications, you might actually get yourself into a situation where you create complications. I think that is perhaps connected with just staying in one place. Because if you stay in one place, the absolute essence of that place in which you're in becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And there may come a point where it may actually become unbearable. And, for example, let's say you spent all day at home, you spend a lot of time with your family. That might seem a relaxing thing to do, but at a certain point, it may not become relaxing at all, because you're just having to deal with the same people, with the same issues, with the same set of emotions, and it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and it could reach a point where it actually becomes complicated, and you're dealing with stuff that you don't really want to deal with. And then you might then realize that actually it might have been better if you'd perhaps been more adventurous, taken a higher profile, and that might have seemed risky to take a higher profile, perhaps to have gone somewhere different, to perhaps have taken a social risk. That might have seemed more complicated, but maybe the big risk might be actually doing what feels safest. So just do consider that. And I think that there is a sense in which today, the line of least resistance is just to be focusing on your feelings. It's great to have feelings, but feelings can they can get out of control. And instead, perhaps what you need to do, Cancer, is to work on the level of the mind rather than actually on your feelings. I do understand that Cancer is a water sign, and Cancer is supposed to be quite emotionally aware, that Cancer is on its strongest territory. Cancer is at its strongest when it's dealing with emotions, but maybe not today. Today, I think, Cancer, you would be better off if you just considered what is right in front of you on what is real, and ideally, Cancer, you will just try to talk things through. There's a lot to be said for talking things through. Your verbal skills, like yesterday, are going to be very effective, and I think you're going to be able to explain yourself very well, especially when you're dealing with things on a material level. Just talking about details, talking about things that matter, things that are simple and comprehensible. And I think that people will listen to what you have to say. They may not be amazed by what you have to say, but the thing is that you'll come over as just being solid and reliable. And don't think beyond the situation, and just don't make things more complicated than they have to be. Though, as I've perhaps already suggested, try to give yourself a little bit of variety over the course of the day. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of variety, but just may just be moving from one room to another room. Depends on what kind of day you're planning on having. But if you don't want to spend all your day in one place or in one chair in an extreme situation, just give yourself some variety. Don't spend too long doing any one thing, because if you do that, you might get too much of a good thing, and things might get emotional, and you might find that as you think you're moving towards safety, you're actually moving towards complications. And I don't think, Cancer, that's anything you really want to deal with. Leo, you feel that you may want to just do nothing of any significance today. That might be your first impulse. I mean, there are things you want to do for sure, but you don't want to make it too significant. You don't want to really commit yourself. And I think you're going to want to avoid doing anything that's too complicated. And I think that you're going to also put a great emphasis on facts and details. You're not really going to be interested too much in looking at things from an overall perspective. I mean, that's just too complicated. But the trouble is, Leo, that if you just focus entirely on the details of the matter, whatever that matter is, you don't move too far beyond your comfort zone. You just think, okay, let's just answer these questions. We'll answer these questions and everything will be fine. But individual answers, ironically, are not going to give you the answer. You can have as many questions as you can ask as many questions as you like. Each one of your questions may be accurately answered, but you're going to be none the wiser. And at some stage, you're going to need to put it all together. And that is something Leos can do. But at the moment, you seem to be perhaps avoiding that challenge. It just seems to be something you don't want to be involved with. So I think, Leo, what you've really got to concentrate on is not just the small question, it's the big overall question. It's where everything fits together. If you get too close to something, you can't see it. You've got to take a step back. And that might mean that you have to be assertive. You have to just say, no, it cannot be like this. You can't just spend ages and ages just, for example, listening to people, what they're talking about, that's not going to make you any the wiser. You have to start to look at things from a much, much wider perspective. And perhaps that takes a little bit of a leap of faith, not quite knowing where you're going to, but just saying you've got to get an overall perspective. And that really is going to be important. And if you give yourself the chance, your mind can be really powerful, really incisive, and you can really get to the bottom of things. And it is about being able to be intense. A bit of intensity goes a long way. And it's just seeing beyond the factual details and just seeing something that quite possibly you don't really want to deal with. Perhaps because you feel it's too complicated, because it's going to require too much effort. So that is something you've got to do. If it's trivial, then leave it behind. Trivialities. If you focus on, how do I put it? If you are trivial, and if you focus on things that are trivial, then the universe will treat you in a similar way. It will start to trivialize you. And if the universe starts to trivialize you, in the end, you're going to feel a certain loss of identity. If you want to really be able to tune into your identity, and as a Leo, your identity is really important, you've got to just go way beyond your current situation, way beyond. I'm not talking about you having to actually go anywhere. It's just about the way your mind is working, the way you're setting your horizons. And perhaps that's how it works, that perhaps there's a sort of a button that sets your horizons, and you perhaps start the day setting your horizons on a very low level, just in terms of what you can see around you. And you need to turn that button up. You need to widen your horizons. Just go through the day with a broader sense of what is possible. And I think that you will be helped by certain other people. Certain other people are going to be very useful in terms of making you think. But there are going to be other people that are just going in the other way. They're just going around in circles, worrying about trivial details. That is absolutely not something you should be focusing on. And it's also not about social niceties. It's easy to focus on just social niceties, just doing things that are pleasant, just feeling that you're not causing any upset. Everyone is comfortable. If everyone is comfortable, if everyone is just enjoying themselves and no deep questions are being asked, in that situation, that's maybe a hint that something is wrong. There's something out there relating perhaps to your destiny or some broader belief system that you need to be really focusing on. Yet, Leo, I'm not entirely saying that you should just be sort of, on cloud nine. I'm not suggesting that at all. In a way, you're on cloud nine if you're just obsessed with, if you're obsessing about boring little facts, tedious little facts which are going nowhere. That is a distraction. You have to be very practical in terms of finding a new way of being, and you have to accept that this is the right thing to be doing for yourself. And while all this is going on, I suppose we can't avoid the fact that there is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus. And this Mercury-Venus conjunction, in some respects, may contradict a lot of what I have to say on the surface. But this Mercury-Venus conjunction is quite material and financially based. So there actually is a place for having serious thoughts and discussions and ideas about money, but just don't obsess about it. So if you want to spend some time thinking about money, do it quickly. It's not like you have to spend all day thinking about money, not at all. But there may be moments today when you can have blasts, a real insight about money. And if there's some financial thing that needs to be sorted out, then Leo, I think you can sort it out really very quickly. You'll know exactly who to talk to. You ask them a few questions, and that's it. But I know I've just said earlier, but you shouldn't ask trivial little questions. But if these questions are very focused about money, just about money, there's just something that just can be resolved by asking the right questions to the right people. So that's today. It's just important that you distinguish between the higher and the lower. The lower could trap you. When I say about the lower, just focusing on things which are beneath you, trivialities, things that could just send you in the wrong direction. By and large, you need to think about the broader picture. But still, with money, there could be a blast of intense mental activity where you're able to get to the bottom of things very quickly and maybe resolve some old financial problems. So that is a possibility. But sorry for that reading. It was a little bit contradictory, but I'm just hoping that you understand where the contradictions are. And I suppose it is astrology. There are always going to be some contradictory messages here. But as I said, it's all about distinguishing between the higher and the lower and not mixing them up. Virgo, you benefit, I think, from a conjunction between Mercury and Venus. And I think you were starting to feel that conjunction between Mercury and Venus yesterday. And now, today, that Mercury-Venus conjunction is exact. And with this Mercury-Venus conjunction, I think that you're going to be... You're going to be, I think, pretty clever, and the things you say will be very precise. And when you talk to people, I think that they're going to trust you because it will be absolutely clear that you know what you're talking about. There's going to be no doubt about that. And so if you've got something on your mind, then talk about it. Tell people about it. Explain it. And you'll be very good at explaining yourself. And it might actually be a good opportunity to start to talk about the things that you're good at and to talk about your expertise. Because Virgo, you certainly have a lot of expertise. Now, Mercury is retrograde. And because Mercury is retrograde, some Virgos might have some self-doubt. You might be thinking, can you really do it? Do you really have that kind of ability? Well, right now the answer is yes. And if you hold back, if you keep things to yourself now, then you might kind of miss an opportunity, and it may not be, say, until next month that you get another chance to explain yourself. So now is the time, Virgo, when you need to sort of wax lyrical. You've got things to say, and I don't think that you're going to be wasting any time. I think that you're going to be very precise, and you're not going to talk nonsense. You're not going to talk rubbish. And that's going to be a major part of who you are. Now, there is still a danger today that you focus on the wrong things, and you do want things to be simple. Virgos generally do like things to be easy and simple. And if you try to make things too simple and you just try to focus on the obvious, then you may be disappointed. You might have thought that something was absolutely obvious and wasn't going to require much effort, and then you might just find that it's not at all like that. And for example, with money, if you decide to put effort into the financial side of things today, and you might think it's all very easy, you might actually realize that money is not easy at all. And if you look at your money and your finances, you'll start to see the linkages, that it's actually linked to something different, and that your financial well-being is linked to another person's financial well-being, and there are links there, and it's just perhaps a little bit difficult to handle. And at the same time, you may be confronted by another person's avarice and greed. Okay, it could be your avarice and greed, but someone is not behaving correctly with money, and they're getting their priorities wrong in terms of money. Now, as I said, that might be you. Do you actually have the right attitude to money? And maybe you're holding on to an idea about money which may be completely rooted in the past. Decades, may go back to your childhood, some particular attitude to money that is perhaps not helpful. And this attitude to money on the surface might seem appropriate, but actually it could actually be quite self-destructive. And so consider how you are dealing with money and your thoughts about money. And remembering that money is actually a token. Obviously it is a token, but it perhaps may be a token for something else. It may be a representative of issues about power and control. Or it may be that at some level you maybe, for example, want people to like you. And you perhaps have always wanted people to like you. And so perhaps money and how you give money could be a way in which you feel that you can gain people's favour. I mean, that's an example. Just think about your attitude to money at the moment, and think about how it might actually be rooted in the past, and how you may just have got things wrong, and how it's now time to just have a different attitude to money, to sort of align yourself to the future. And it's an individual attitude to money. I think perhaps to some extent your attitude to money has just been you've had a sense of doing what you feel is right, doing what you feel is expected of you, and that expectation may go right back. It might go right back to your childhood and how people were dealing with money when you were a child, or how you felt people were dealing with money as a child. Though I don't want to, make today sound too complicated, too difficult, because it's not a difficult day. It shouldn't be a difficult day. As I said right at the beginning, you're an effective communicator, and I do think that your social skills are very good. And when you're focusing on other people, when you're with other people, when you are considering the various links and relationships between other people, you're actually very powerful. You can bring people together in a very strong kind of way, and people will perhaps look to you for some kind of social leadership. And so if you want to organize people and get people to like each other, get people to like you, perhaps there is a particular person you want to get closer to. You just may feel that you just haven't been close enough, and you feel that it's time for sort of more sharing, to strengthen some kind of union. I think that that's something you can do. I think you'll know what to say, and I think you'll know what levers to pull, and you can be a bit manipulative about it, but I don't think you have to be too manipulative about it. Just make sure that you're thinking about the wider good, and obviously don't be selfish about it. What is good for you? What is good for another person? What is good for the group? If you can consider that, and I think that you can be quite public-spirited about it. Yeah, I think that you can be a force for unity, and indeed, if people are at odds with each other, I think you can actually find a way of breaking the deadlock. So in that sense, many Virgos today might actually be quite good negotiators. Libra, you're feeling a bit better today, I think, because the moon is moving into your sign. That's always good, isn't it? You have had the moon in Virgo. Okay, the moon may be in Virgo for some of the day, or I suppose all of the day, perhaps, if you're in Australia and New Zealand, but still the moon is changing sign. And so when the moon moves into Libra, you're in general just feeling more comfortable, and you're feeling that you understand what's happening, at least on the surface, and that might give you greater confidence that you can respond to people effectively and, understand what's going on. But there is some danger here that you perhaps get too comfortable. You might just think that you understand everything, and that might encourage you to be complacent. You just feel that everything's fine. You can make assumptions about people without any problem, and I suppose there's a slight danger, I think, of laziness there. And if you don't put in the effort to try to understand what is happening, then you might be disappointed or even surprised. And we do have, the moon may be moving into Libra, it may be moving into your sign, but that's not the only thing going on. It's moving towards the conjunction of the South Node. It's indeed moving towards a conjunction of Black Moon Lilith, because right now we've got a Black Moon Lilith South Node conjunction, at least in terms of true Black Moon Lilith. And so just when you're complacent is when things can go wrong. If you feel that you understand everything, that everything is clear, that you're sitting pretty, if that's how it feels, then potentially you're asking for trouble, and you might be surprised by other people's responses, other people's reactions, indeed your own reactions and responses, and things might just get a little bit nasty even. And it's just because you're not in full control, because you've made assumptions about other people. And so that could be a little bit dangerous. So what you have to do is in some way reconsider things and start tuning into the fact that things are more complicated than they seem on the surface. And I think you'll be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Pluto. And so with moon trine Pluto, it's a time when you need to create a few changes and see what needs to be changed. Ask yourself what needs to be changed, and try to make an effort to understand the people you're dealing with and the situations you're dealing with. I mean, it's almost like you don't want to do it. You don't want to try it. You don't want to understand it. But I think that you do need to make that effort if you don't want to get yourself into a situation where you really don't have a lot of control. And matters are not helped by the fact that, well, firstly, Venus is making a heliocentric opposition to Neptune. So Venus making a heliocentric opposition to Neptune, that really does indicate, Libra, that you're capable of misunderstanding things in a big way. You think you get it, but you're perhaps emotionally overwhelmed. Your emotions are tricked. Your emotions, they want an easy life. They want things to be easy, but things aren't easy. And how it seems on the surface is not actually how it is. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we've got a sense in which you are somewhat accident prone at the moment. The reason is that Venus is your ruler, obviously, and Venus is aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And so that aspect between the Mars-Uranus midpoint, which is it's a square. Venus is square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because Venus has just made quite recently, Venus was square Uranus. Venus is applying to a square of Mars, and Venus is now on the halfway point, halfway between the square of Uranus and the square of Mars. So that means, Libra, that you're perhaps in too much of a hurry to make things happen at some level. And in your hurry, things happen that you just hadn't prepared yourself for. And again, if you assume that everything is going to be fine, then that complacency can lead to just events that you're just not properly prepared for. So it's just very important to be aware all the time, to have your eyes open all day long, and also to consider how your own frustrations and your own impatience can feed into other activities in your life. So, I don't know, if you're mowing the lawn or driving or whatever, it's not just the action that matters, it's your inner world, it's your inner feelings, and your inner feelings can have an imprint on what you're doing. So do understand the connectedness of it all. And if you're uncertain or angry about something in one area, that can feed into something else, and that, for example, could lead to some kind of accident or mishap. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm sure most Librans, maybe practically all Librans, are going to be fine. But I just have to give you, I just do have to give you that warning. So, on the surface, Libra, things appear to be fine. It just seems to be like a flat sea. But under the surface, things are quite complicated. And in order to protect yourself from all of this, just take the view that it is a complicated day. Just take the view that things could go wrong. Take the view that you can't take anything for granted. And in a way, with that approach, you will be creating your own luck. Because kind of the universe likes that kind of attitude, doesn't it? I sometimes think the universe wants people to be sort of walking on tiptoes, or has, wanting to be. The universe wants people to be careful. The universe wants people to just take the view that things could go wrong. So with that approach, I do think that you will be attracting luck. If you're cautious, you're going to be fortunate, I think. If you are reckless, then you're heading for trouble. And if you're complacent, you're heading for trouble. And you shouldn't feel that you have to do things in any particular way. I think that by taking an intense approach and by seeing transformation as something that could happen at any moment, then I think you would actually be doing the right thing. Now, as far as your work, your career, if that's relevant, then I think that you can make some important changes because of Moon trine Uranus. And I think it's about telling people, for example, employers or anyone else you're having to deal with in a social sense, it's just telling people what you can do and what you're good at, and not just going with the flow. Because in a way, if you are doing something that you're not comfortable with, if you feel that it's not really you, then you're creating a situation where at an unconscious level you could trip yourself up. But on the other hand, if you're doing something which you feel that it is you, it's a serious project, you understand the risks, but if you're doing it and it's part of your identity and your personality, then you will be attracting favorable attention. And don't be afraid to talk about it. I've been a bit negative so far, but I should say that Mercury is conjunct Venus. Venus is your ruler. Mercury is conjunct Venus. So because Mercury is conjunct Venus, that gives you the opportunity to really understand what is happening, to do the requisite level of analysis. But I just think you might be afraid of making that kind of analysis. You might feel that you don't want to make things too complicated. That can be a Libran approach, trying to avoid complications. But if you are prepared to do some serious analysis about yourself and the world around you, I think that the universe will smile on you. Scorpio, you might feel that it's better to let someone else do it. Whatever it is, it just might be easier, as far as you're concerned, if you handed over the responsibility to someone else. Maybe because they're going to be more effective than you. Maybe you just can't be bothered. And I think I can understand why you might take that approach. It certainly seems easier, but you have to ask the question, to what extent do you have control? And it just might be a time when Scorpios might want to let go of their control over something. But I'm not sure if that's a good idea. If you let go of something, let someone else just take the responsibility, do things their way, I just do think that things might go wrong. And there might actually be a cause for regret. And I'm not saying, Scorpio, that you have to sort of micromanage everything, but you have to keep an eye on things. You have to know what's going on. You can't entirely delegate responsibility. And I think that the universe wants you to be there and to be monitoring things. And so if you can just monitor things, you can give people responsibility. You can let people do things, but you just have to keep an eye on them. And just by keeping an eye on them, you've probably done your job, and that is enough. So perhaps that's a question of just a question of getting the balance right. You can't just retreat and give control to other people, but at the same time, you don't want to micromanage. And so do get the balance right, and I think that it will be fine. And it's micromanage, well, manage. I think overall today you will actually be very good at managing in an appropriate way, whether you're managing yourself and your immediate environment or whether you're managing other people. You're going to be very good at it, and I think that people are going to respect you because I think you have the ability to get the balance right. As I've just said, it's giving people some control but not total control, and you're still there. You can still exercise some kind of leadership without having to be authoritarian or in people's face. So I think in that sense, Scorpio, I really do think that you're going to be able to get the balance pretty right with a little bit of effort. And when it comes to relationships, it's a time when I think it's a good idea to talk. Talking is going to be a very useful activity. I know some Scorpios sometimes don't like to talk, but at the moment you have got a way with words, and other people also have a way with words, and talking can move things in many directions. Talking can just be a filler. You can just talk to someone to gain their trust, but you can also talk to someone as a way of getting information and understanding what is happening. And so you don't have to be afraid of, for example, having a phone call with someone, even a long phone call with someone, because I think you're going to be able to cover a lot of ground. And you may actually find that some people are prepared to say more than you'd realized. So perhaps you'd assumed that, if you get in touch with someone, it's going to be a waste of time simply because they won't have much to say. They're not going to tell you what you need to hear. But in fact, if you listen to what people say, it's not even about necessarily having to ask the right questions. It's just, if you just listen to what people have to say, and you're just going to gather just a huge amount of information. And I just think that some of that information could be extremely useful, maybe not now, but in the near future. So let people talk. And if you don't listen to them now, if you don't let them talk now, then you might be making things more difficult later on, because now is a chance to get information. And if you leave it until tomorrow or next week, then the chance might be gone. So perhaps if you're involved in a conversation with someone and you're thinking that this conversation is going on for too long, don't be in a hurry to close the conversation, because as the conversation proceeds, you will gather more and more information, and you may hear something that actually could be quite important to you, and that you can really take advantage of it. Sagittarius. It's tempting, isn't it, to just focus on the group, your role in the group, your social life, just to sort of drift along and perhaps to do things other people's way. So if someone's got a suggestion, you'll just follow the suggestion. I mean, it's nice that way, because you just don't have to make any decisions. But I'm not quite sure if that is actually the right approach. I don't think it is. I think that other people, in particular your friends, could be a major distraction. And if you spend too long with friends or with other people in your social life, not only could you waste a lot of time, but you could be drawn away from the things that really matter. And at the moment, what really matters is you and your creative self-expression. Because at the moment, I think that there's a lot you can accomplish, and it's about your individual role and understanding what that individual role is and appreciating it. You can't be someone else. Sure, there is, I think, pressure for you to be someone else. There's pressure for you to conform with someone else's image of you. But just remember that no one is treating you as a whole person. I mean, this isn't anything about today. It's a fact. We never treat no one ever gets treated as a whole person. Everyone treats everyone they meet, doesn't matter who they are, as objects to some level. You can't possibly understand what the whole person really is. And at the moment, there's pressure for you to fit into a fake image. And yeah, that is pressure that you need to resist. And by getting a sense of your own wholeness and what you're supposed to be doing, and that's going to be an important part of what today is about. So don't spend too much time listening to other people and following their suggestions and following their advice. Though I think that you are able to change things around. You can be with people. These people are trying to change you. They're trying to have an impact on you. There's a sort of a bit of a game going on here. Who's in control? But with the moon making a trine to Pluto, there's a scope here for you to actually completely change things around completely, and to put people in a situation where you may be controlling them. So they start trying to control you, but you can transform things. And it's perhaps about how you lead the conversation, how you change the conversation. So if someone is talking to you, you follow the conversation, you understand how you're being pressured, and then through a sudden leap, everything changes, and it's you in control of the conversation, and it's you making things happen. And that's perhaps the way it should be, though it works both ways. You have an idea about the way people should be. You can try your hardest to understand someone and to try to empathize, but still, they are an object, and you don't want to be treated as an object. And by the same token, you don't want to treat other people as objects. And at the same time as this, there is this negativity building up, and this negativity is about a feeling, perhaps on your part, that some things are starting to go wrong. Again, I don't think it's about you. It's just about, it may actually be about other people. You just feel, you just know that however good things are right now, that things are going to get worse. You just know it. And again, I just don't think it's about you. I don't think it's necessarily about anything to do with your life. It's just about the world and society in which you're living in. And you are picking up on that, and I think it just may be a time when you feel that you need to align yourself to this, and you need to make preparations. And if you suddenly have a feeling that something could go wrong, then you might want to prepare for it. And when I say something going wrong, I mean, I'm still talking about something going wrong probably in the wider world. And so how you can prepare for it. And you're quite capable at the moment of thinking about worst case scenarios. And that actually might be how you are able to manipulate people. So manipulation is, of course, not a very good thing, perhaps. But if for one reason or another you feel it is the right thing to manipulate people, you can do it by kind of doing a sort of opposite Sagittarian approach. Sagittarians are supposed to be optimistic and positive and looking at things in the best possible light. Though I suppose Sagittarians can be negative. I mean, I suppose if you think about Winston Churchill, he was a Sagittarius, and he was warning in the 1930s. He was warning people about Hitler and the dangers of Nazism and a resurgent Germany through the sort of late 1930s, and people didn't listen to him. So perhaps you can take a leaf out of Winston Churchill's book and warn people. Okay, I'm not saying warn people about fascism or dictators. Perhaps you're warning people about something more down to earth. But by warning people and by making people a little bit afraid about the future, I think that if you keep going and you keep up with these warnings, I think that people will actually start to listen to you. And this may be part of a way in which you can manipulate. Because I think in the end you're going to sound very convincing. And yeah, it's not nice being a doomsayer, but today, Sagittarius, I actually think you can actually benefit by being a doomsayer, but you need some social responsibility there. You don't want to make people scared just for the sake of it. It's important that you are making people afraid about something which you regard as being a genuine possibility. But still, there is this side product. But by making people afraid, by making people think twice about their plans, you are going to be, I suppose, boosting your power and authority. Capricorn. Things are, I think, better today in the sense that you have, I believe, a greater sense of purpose. You feel that really there is something that needs to be done, and you're ready to do it, and you can do it, and you're just in the right frame of mind. And the key way for having maximum impact is it's not just about doing something for the sake of it. Perhaps also you might think you have to show some kind of leadership, but leadership for the sake of it, obviously that is not such a good idea. But you have to think about why you're doing it. And today you can sort of bring together your feelings and your concepts of stability and calmness and order, which are all very important to you, and you can reflect it out there onto the world around you. And I think that people are going to listen to you, and you can really have an impact, and you can get people to think about things in your way. And I think that you're going to be particularly effective when it comes to money with the moon trine Pluto. Talking about money, getting the message out about money. So if, for example, there's been a financial concern that you've been having recently, then now is a great time to be able to actually share that concern and to get people to take that concern seriously. I do think that they will very much appreciate it. And, you have to also think about how your ambitions for the future may change. And it's not that the broad direction has to change. It's just a few of the details have to change. And I think that it's a great day for understanding what needs to be done. There is this wonderful conjunction at the moment. I think it's a fairly wonderful conjunction between Mercury and Venus. And this Mercury-Venus conjunction allows you to ask a lot of questions. So if there are things you don't get, things that don't make sense, you can ask all the questions. The questions, I think, will come thick and fast, even though Mercury is retrograde. And the questions will come thick and fast, and so will the answers. I mean, that's what really matters, is getting the answers. And in the process, you might realize that there are a few issues that still need to be dealt with. It's very important to know what you don't know. That really does matter. To know where you need extra knowledge, and that's perhaps part of what today is about. You start to realize what you don't know, and perhaps that applies, if appropriate, to career or business or work. You know what's missing, and I think that right now help is available, advice is available. If you've got questions, I really do think that they can be answered. And it just may be that you're in a situation where some of your questions can be answered very quickly and all at once. And you might feel that you don't want to take advantage of the opportunity. You perhaps don't want to bother someone, but don't worry about it. There are people out there who are quite happy to tell you things. You just have to ask. And so, today you are very much going to become better informed. And as you become better informed, there can be a change in, the way you perceive yourself. And you'll start to realize that you can do things. You didn't think you could not so long ago, but now you realize you can. And so I think, Capricorn, there's just going to be a great sense of power, and also a sense that actually the resources are now available, and you can really sort of bring things together. And in the process, just don't forget what it's all about. It's ambition for the sake of ambition is, of course, just pointless. It's not going to get anywhere. But ambition has to be grounded in something. And Capricorn, you do fundamentally understand the importance of grounding. That's the whole point of being a Capricorn. So if you take your ambitions, you ground them in something real, you ground them in basically who you are, and you're ready to make changes, you're ready to ask questions, you're ready to get answers, even if those answers aren't entirely what you wanted to hear. I think that you really can bring things together today. So I think today can be really great. It's hard work today. I think that you've kind of got a lot on your plate, and you've got to get the balance right, but I think it actually can be pretty successful. Aquarius, you are asking the universe a lot of things. You're perhaps not entirely satisfied with the way things are right now, and you feel that you perhaps want to go beyond, whatever beyond might mean. But the thing is, Aquarius, I'm not convinced that you really know what that means. You sort of have this desire for something, but the question is, can it be fully satisfied? It's like you're almost going in a direction, you feel it's very important to go in this direction, but you don't exactly know where you're going. You don't really have a picture for your destination. Now, it can, they say it's great to travel. Traveling is more important than the destination, all that kind of thing. But not today. You do need a destination. And there's just some danger that you start traveling, I don't necessarily mean literally traveling, you move in a particular direction without knowing why. And it may be that one reason might be that you're following other people's advice. So it may be there are people around you that want to move in a particular direction. They, you follow, you just, you just join it. You don't know why. I remember the first demonstration I ever went on. I was in London a long time ago, and I was walking. I was in, I don't know, it was around Russell Square, and I saw this demonstration going down the street. I had no idea what the demonstration was about, but I joined the demonstration anyway and joined the march. It was quite fun, but I didn't have a clue where I was going. I didn't have a clue what the demonstration was about. I still don't know what it was about, but I know it was fun. But I can't remember. I did not know. I saw these placards, these signs, but I didn't know what I was demonstrating about, where I was marching to, what it was about, and that's nice. But I think today is not really a day for just joining a demonstration if you don't know what it's about, joining a march because you don't know where it's going. But that could happen. So, Aquarius, you need to think about why you're doing what you're doing, because I just think at some level you don't really know what you're doing, and that is, as I said, that is especially the case if you're being pressured by other people. People tell you that this is the right thing to be doing, and you might say, okay, fine. Not a very Aquarian response. Aquarians are supposed to be very independent-minded, as I keep saying, but you just might lose some of that independent-mindedness, maybe, unless you're prepared to just take control of the situation. And I think you can take control of the situation because, Pluto, remember, is now in the first degree of Aquarius. The moon is trine Pluto. And so you can take a situation where you're not fully in control, where you don't actually know where you're going, and you can just say, hold on, what is going on? And so if you're involved in some activity and you're very caught up in this activity, and it's a social activity perhaps, it may be for pleasure, it may be about work, it may be something to do with your family, whatever, just stop and ask some questions. And questions are coming up today a lot. For all of the 12 signs, I'm using questions. It is perhaps a day of questions. Whatever your sign, it is a day of questions. And it is a day for asking questions. And each sign has its own questions to ask. And you have your own questions to ask. And the questions you have to ask are about why are we going where we're going? What is the point? And it just may be that people just haven't thought about it. And, it can be anything, I suppose. Even if you're, I don't know, for example, you might be involved in some kind of, charitable activity. People are doing something for charity. It just seems a good thing to do. But then you ask why? Where's this money going to? What is the point? Who is going to benefit? These questions have to be asked. And I don't think that people want to answer questions, even if they're obvious. But Aquarius, you're the person to perhaps create the change. You ask the question, and it's a question that it just hadn't occurred to anyone that this question might be asked. But you ask it, and you might ask someone a question and they just might not know how to answer it. And it may just be a really easy question, obvious question, and they can't answer it. And then that is going to be a sure sign that something is wrong, that you're moving in the wrong direction. But on a more positive note, directions can be changed and they can be fine-tuned. So you may be going vaguely, you, and particularly you and other people, may be moving in a particular direction. It may be the right direction to be going in a vague kind of way, but there isn't a plan. And you don't need a plan unless something goes wrong. You only need to plan when something goes wrong. And it just might be a good idea to just get these questions out of the way now, just in case something does go wrong. And if questions can't be answered, then something's wrong, something really is badly wrong and needs to be changed. And through questioning and through discussion and negotiation, you can perhaps take a situation which may be going nowhere, or worse, maybe about to move on to the rocks, and you can change the direction a bit and create a constructive sense of purpose, not just for yourself, but for everyone else. Pisces, there is a certain sense of foreboding today. And I'm not trying to scare you or anything, just foreboding, just a feeling that something is about to happen. Again, when I say these kind of things, invariably I'm not just talking about you and you and your family and the people that matter to you. I'm not really talking about that. I'm just talking about just a foreboding, just a sense that things are not entirely right. And Pisces, it's a, you're a water sign. You're sensitive. You often pick up on things before other people do. And if you do have a sense of foreboding, you need to get the right perspective. Just because you have a sense of foreboding doesn't actually mean that anything bad is going to happen, and certainly doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen to you and the people you care about. It's more about a foreboding about the world at large. You are linked. We are all linked to the collective unconscious, and when things change, the sort of the collective unconscious changes. I don't know. I suppose if you want to use a Star Wars analysis, is it a disturbance in the Force? Well, not quite, but it's a sense that there's absolutely no grounds for complacency whatsoever, and maybe you're starting to just get a feel of what could go wrong, and as a result, you could start to become quite cautious, and people may pick up on your caution. You're not going to want to take risks, and there may be resistance for that, because other people might not understand what you're talking about. They might not understand what you're worrying about. But if you feel that things aren't right, you need to respect that feeling, but obviously not exaggerate it. And I would think I was talking about this to Sagittarius, because I think Sagittarius has a similar sense of this. Because you and Sagittarius, you're both ruled by Jupiter, and I'm sort of looking at the overall condition of Jupiter, and you perhaps just need to just involve yourself in some kind of preparation. Again, that's what I was saying to Sagittarius as well. And you then have to deal with other people's complacency, and you can try your hardest to get people to take you seriously, but nonetheless, they just might not be bothered. They might just feel that they want to focus entirely on the present, and they're just not going to take the right precautions. Now, one of the key points here, Pisces, is just not to exaggerate. You know, when we get vague feelings, we do tend to exaggerate them. It's not going to be that bad, I don't think, and you don't want to turn it into some kind of intense drama. I mean, that is important. You just need to be just very sensible about it. Just be very focused on some quite logical, natural steps you can take to make sure that you are safeguarded. And part of those steps are just making sure that you're mentally prepared, that you are just considering what reasonably could go wrong, and just making sure that you are just in the right place, and just don't make things more complicated than they actually have to be. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first and only hexagram I got was hexagram number 19, which is approach. And yeah, there were no moving lines. And so approach is very much as it sounds. It's an approach of something is starting. It's a time when things appear to be going in the right direction, when we can make our influence felt. People will listen to what we have to say, and it can be a time when we can be an effective teacher, and indeed we can really start to show some leadership. And so we just mustn't doubt ourselves, but at the same time we need to realize that it's a situation which is not going to last forever. The I Ching does give that warning, and the situation is, I don't know, I think it could come to pieces, within a month. And it warns about the 8th month. Now, you probably know better than me what the 8th month means. Things go wrong at the 8th month, and I know that some people watching this video probably know more about Chinese traditions, know more about Chinese traditions than me. But the 8th month, as I understand it, is, if you take the first month as being with the Chinese New Year, which is what Chinese New Year is, January, February. So the 8th month is going to be sort of late summer, and we're already late summer, and sort of late summer is, I don't know, August, September, that kind of time, late August. So take advantage of the time in which we're living right now. Things might still seem a little bit chaotic, but things are okay. Things aren't falling to pieces yet. And so, okay, it looks pretty bad in the UK, doesn't it? But I suppose we'll survive. But in terms of us, we have an opportunity now. It's a sort of a metaphor is that this is spring. I know it's not spring, it's early August, but it's a time when we can make our influence felt, when we've got things to offer, when we can communicate, we can teach, we can show some leadership, and yeah, we can have a very real influence. And this opportunity is not going to last forever. It would seem that possibly in a few weeks' time, maybe this is a time when the situation really starts to get seriously difficult as we move into the 8th month. So the 8th month is almost upon us, and so we just have to be in a position where we can just take advantage of it all, and we might therefore have a little bit of a hurry. So if there's something you want to communicate, if you want to show some leadership, if there's something you want to teach, if you want to have an influence, now is very much the time to do it. Don't hang on forever, because there is a danger that you miss the opportunity. And I should say that underlying this hexagram, we always look at the nuclear hexagram. Well, not always. I mean, I do look at the nuclear hexagram. This is a hexagram in the middle of this hexagram. The nuclear hexagram is return, and so this may be telling us something about the underlying picture. Perhaps with return, we have a situation where we needed to take things as far as we could, and then inevitably return back to where we started. And maybe that is the underlying picture of approach. So right now we are in a sort of short-term expansive frame of mind where we can expand, where we can consider new horizons, new audiences, new people to listen to our message. But in the end, very soon, we're going to have to return. We've said what we've said. We have this chance to teach, to make our influence felt. We can take things as far as we can, but very soon we're going to have to withdraw again, because the times will be different, and we'll be perhaps dealing with times when times are less stable, when perhaps people are less willing to listen to what we have to say. So we do have to work with the times in which we're living. And so I think that is the message of the I Ching. And I also think that that's perhaps is linked with, what's happening astrologically. I'm thinking maybe it's also linking with the fact that Jupiter is aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. That's quite a difficult one, Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. I mean, it is Jupiter, which is quite an expansive thing, but it's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, which is about restriction, and just knowing that Jupiter, about pessimism of Jupiter on Mars-Saturn, just knowing that things aren't going to stay good forever. And so that Jupiter on the Mars-Saturn midpoint maybe just giving us further information about what's happening today, what's happening at the moment. And so we just have to be aware that nothing lasts forever. This is a situation we can take advantage of it, but maybe in a few weeks' time we're just going to have to accept the inevitable and just withdraw, and we just have to, I don't know, I suppose make hay while the sun shines. But things can't stay good forever. And I know they might not seem good, particularly for example, if you're in the UK, but still we need to take advantage of that small window of opportunity, because I don't think it's going to last forever. Okay, so now I want to go back to American politics, and I want to go back to this VP pick that Kamala Harris made. And so Kamala Harris, I believe Kamala Harris announced this choice at around 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on that would have been yesterday. Well, that would have been on, when did she make that choice? She made that choice on Tuesday, didn't she? I get confused. Yeah. So the question is, was it the right time to make that announcement? Astrologers, one aspect of astrology, one area of astrology is electional astrology. An electional astrology doesn't mean the astrology of elections. It's the astrology of electing a time in which to do something. And you might, for example, elect the time to get married. You've got a wedding chart, so that's an example of an election. You might also decide what is the best time to make an announcement. For example, making an announcement that you're going to choose Tim Walz as your vice presidential candidate. So, turning to the chart of the pick, I'm not saying that this chart is going to be absolutely precise. I've gone for 9 a.m. I've set it for Washington, D.C. You might sort of argue about that. I maybe should have set it for somewhere else. But even if haven't got the time absolutely right, I think we can be fairly sure we got Virgo rising when the announcement was made. Okay, I did make a lot of effort trying to work out when that time actually was, and I came up with 9 a.m. So on the East Coast it is Virgo rising. So this is a possible chart. Mercury is retrograde. It's in Virgo, though. Virgo is a planet of communication. It's well placed in Virgo. It's a sign where it works pretty well. And, okay, it's unfortunate that it's retrograde. The moon has just made a conjunction to Mercury. Now, if you've got Virgo rising and you use whole sign houses, then you could say, well, Mercury's in the first house. Of course, in the Placidus system, it might be in the 12th house. But you might have Mercury in the sign of in the sign of the ascendant, which you could say is potentially fortunate. But I suppose that still doesn't relieve us of the fact that Mercury is retrograde, and it's just after a new moon. So we had the new moon over the weekend, and is that right? Yeah. So that is fortunate also, because the moon is waxing. She's made the announcement on the waxing cycle of the moon. The moon is getting bigger. If you want to launch something, then yeah, having the moon waxing is certainly a good thing to have. The moon is getting stronger, and it's also in a different sign from the sun, which is it's another reason why it's fortunate, because the sun is in Leo, the moon is now in Virgo, so the moon is not so burnt out by the sun. So there are some good things in this chart. Now, if we've got the timing right, we've got Mars, Jupiter on the midheaven. Well, that's a big splash, isn't it? Mars, Jupiter on the midheaven. Mars and Jupiter, it's very energetic, action-orientated, but Mars is Mars. Mars is a malefic. Doesn't matter which way you cut it. Mars is a malefic, and it's in Gemini. Mars doesn't rule Gemini. I don't know whether Mars is Mars is peregrine or not? That would be a question. The question is, does Mars actually have any dignity there? I mean, that is something that we do need to consider. But in terms of Egyptian terms, Mars does not have any dignity in that part of that in that part of Gemini. However, Mars does rule by face the middle decanate of Gemini. So Mars is not peregrine. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of dignity there. So Mars isn't necessarily so badly placed. So that's okay. Then we have to consider the moon. The moon is the most important planet in a chart because it represents function. It's how the chart moves. It's all very well having these static positions, but Mars in Gemini, Mercury in Virgo. But the moon is action. It's the flow in the chart, and the moon. It's made the conjunction to Mercury. So what is the moon's next aspect? And the moon's next aspect is a square to Mars. And having done that, it makes an opposition to Saturn. And in terms of aspects, I would have said that is not particularly fortunate. I think moon moving to Mars doesn't strike me as being a particularly good thing. I think that it suggests aggravation coming up. And also, assuming we've got 9 a.m. as the timing of the announcement, we've got Saturn on the 7th house cusp, potentially Saturn in the 7th. That's perhaps enemies. And Moon makes it square to Mars, then I suppose in the end it moves on and it will make an opposition to Saturn. So it's almost like the Moon is quite well placed at the moment, Moon conjunct Mercury, but I think there could be trouble later on, and the Moon doesn't, because the Moon makes a square to Mars, then it makes a square to Jupiter. Jupiter certainly is peregrine. It doesn't have any dignity in that part of the sky, in that part of Gemini. So I think that there could be trouble quite soon with that. But now, you would never look at an election, by the way, and say that dooms the campaign or it guarantees that Kamala's going to be elected. It's just one part of the puzzle. And with that Moon square Mars, it might be a good idea to use symbolic measure. So a symbolic measure, you could say, well, look at the Moon. Moon is what? About 8 Virgo. So it is about... and Mars is at 11 degrees 20 Gemini. So in 3 1/3 degrees, the Moon will be making a square to Mars. So 3 1/3 degrees, you could say, well, let's make that 3 1/3 months. So 3 1/3 months would take us, where are we? We're August, September, October, November. That would take us to about November the 20th, which is after the election, but it's about 3 months. So I think that the Moon square Mars symbolically kind of links with the election result. And so I think there's perhaps a certain cause for concern there. The fact that that Moon square Mars, which I don't think is going to be a fortunate aspect, I think it could be quite aggravating. I do think that might link to problems with the election, problems happening in November. Now, I've looked at Kamala Harris in terms of her link up with Tim Walz. So yesterday, I was looking at how did her chart relate to that of Tim Walz, and looking at the news and what people have said, apparently Kamala Harris felt comfortable with Tim Walz. And it seems that her decision was very much about chemistry. And if you look at the chemistry between Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, I mean, I said I've done this before, but I'm not going to spend long on this, so forgive me for repeating myself. But if we put Kamala Harris in the middle, and I still don't have a time of birth for Tim Walz, but my view, what I said yesterday, was that his Jupiter at 28 Aries was conjunct Kamala's moon, and I just think that part of it was just he made her feel good. I think it was just as simple as that. It's true that his Saturn was conjunct her midheaven. Now that could have been a problem, that Saturn conjunct the midheaven, but perhaps the fact that Saturn was conjunct her Saturn was okay. So I think that while the Jupiter on her moon is certainly good news, it's said you can imagine how it would make her feel comfortable. Here's Jupiter in Aries. He's got a load of stuff in Aries. He's got Mars in Aries. By the way, Tim Walz's Mars in Aries at 6 degrees 26 Aries was very close to Willie Brown. Remember, Willie Brown was the man who launched Kamala Harris's career. She had an affair with him early in his career, early on in the beginning of her political career, and because of this affair, because of her relationship with Willie Brown, she was able to get elected to things. So in a way, she, through Willie Brown and her affair with Willie Brown, she was able to kickstart her political career. But Willie Brown has his Mars at 456. He was born, I think, March 20th, 1934. Willie Brown has his Mars at 456 Aries. So going back to with Tim Walz's chart. Tim Walz has his Mars at 6 degrees 26 Aries. So there may be a certain level at which, I don't know, that 4, 5, 6 Aries, just perhaps there was a sense of comfort. Maybe she sort of, I don't know, there was a link. I don't know why 5, 6 Aries might be important, but I just thought that was just something, a little piece of trivia I'd point out. But I think it's the fact that, she's got the moon in Aries, and it may not be the degree that matters. Having people with a load of Aries just makes her feel comfortable. It sort of nurtures her moon. So, Willie Brown and Tim Walz both had their Marses in Aries. That some way it was okay. It felt good, and for her. And then now we've got Tim Walz's Jupiter in Aries, right on Kamala's moon, so that just made her feel comfortable, and it didn't matter the fact that Saturn is on her midheaven, though I think that Saturn on the midheaven is potentially serious because it may help block her. She went for Tim Walz. She went for someone who is on the progressive left of the party. It's not a balanced ticket, and he's from where's he from? His state is Minnesota. I think the last time the Republicans won Minnesota was in 1972. If she'd gone for Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania, she was going to win Minnesota anyway. But what about Pennsylvania? But she didn't choose Josh Shapiro. So why didn't she choose Josh Shapiro? So I think one reason, of course, why she didn't choose Josh Shapiro was, you think logically, because he's a supporter of Israel, and she didn't want to upset the pro-Palestinian wing of the Democrat Party, and she might have been afraid about what might happen, for example, at the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, that starts on August the 19th. A lot of demonstrations, aggravation, riots. You don't want a repeat of the DNC 1968, which scuppered the Democrats then and let Nixon in. So, was there something more about it in terms of Josh Shapiro? Again, Josh Shapiro, who she rejected. Here's Josh Shapiro's chart. Don't have a time of birth for Josh Shapiro, and she decided that she didn't want to have him on the ticket, even though having Josh Shapiro quite possibly would have got her Pennsylvania, a state she needs to get, I believe, if she wants to have any chance of getting into the White House. But if you look at the synastry between her and Josh Shapiro, remember, it's all about Kamala feeling comfortable, isn't it? Kamala has to feel comfortable, and you don't want anyone to make her feel uncomfortable, do you? That's not something you want to happen. And Kamala, we do have a time of birth for Kamala, obviously, so we know what Kamala's ascendant is, and Kamala's ascendant is 24-25 Gemini, and Josh Shapiro's Saturn is at 24-45 Gemini, and he's got the Sun at 28-44 Gemini. Josh Shapiro probably, particularly if he was born at night, particularly if he was born in the daytime, has a pretty strong Saturn. And Josh Shapiro's Saturn is right on Kamala's ascendant and her North Node. You can see poor Kamala, she was a bit overwhelmed by Josh Shapiro, wasn't she? He didn't make her feel good. So having his Saturn and his Sun on her ascendant, maybe he was too serious. And so perhaps Kamala felt that she didn't want to have him, even though his Sun is in 28 Gemini, was trine her Saturn, and his Saturn was trine her Saturn. I actually think that Josh Shapiro could have done her a lot of good and could have really helped to structure her and to sort of get rid of some of her rough edges. I think she didn't want a challenge. I think that was perhaps it. And I suspect she made a really bad choice choosing Tim Walz over Josh Shapiro. I think if she'd been able to deal with that Saturn on her ascendant and not run away from it and not just retreated to her comfort zone and gone for Tim Walz, I think she may have made a mistake there. And of course, one problem with Josh Shapiro is his support for Israel. I mean, I know he's backtracked a little bit on some of his most enthusiastic support for Israel and criticism of the Palestinians when he wrote some article as a student, 30 years ago. But still, he is Jewish, he's a practicing Jew, and there was, I suppose maybe just felt we didn't want to have a Jewish vice president. I suppose some people say, well, she's already, I believe she's married to someone who's Jewish. But anyway, she didn't want to have it was perhaps felt to be unacceptable to have a Jewish vice president. But yeah, that Saturn on her ascendant, I think, is quite critical. Now, what about Israel? And how is Israel going to impact Kamala Harris? Already, Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech in Congress. I think was it to the Senate, and she made it, or was it combined Congress? I don't know. He made a speech recently. Netanyahu did, and Kamala Harris made sure she wasn't there, that she had some other arrangement. So, what about Kamala Harris and Israel? So it might be a good idea to compare Kamala Harris's chart with Israel's chart. And what does Israel do to Kamala Harris? So we've got Kamala Harris in the middle, and we've got Israel on the outer wheel. Now, it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that Israel's Uranus, when Israel declared independence, its Uranus was at 24-21 Gemini. Now, Josh Shapiro has his Saturn at 24 Gemini. And so Israel's Uranus is right on Kamala Harris's ascendant. And in fact, Israel's got a Jupiter-Uranus opposition on her ascendant-descendant line. And there's something about Israel that kind of freaks Kamala Harris out, that bothers her. And it may be to do with what Israel does. How is she going to deal with Israel's actions between now and, say, the election? Because it's going to have an impact. It's got to have an impact. How she responds to the Middle East, and things happening in the world can have an impact on election results. And look at Israel's Saturn. Israel's Saturn is at 16 Leo, and it's Mars, right conjunct Kamala's Mars, and Mars is kind of in the same place. So approximately you've got, it's not exactly there, but 2 degrees out, but Israel's Mars-Saturn midpoint is on Kamala's Mars. But I do think this Uranus is something that we really need to pay attention to. And I think that Israel could have a bearing on the election. I mean, we have to remember that Benjamin Netanyahu does not want Kamala Harris to win. I think we can say that pretty without much danger of contradiction. I think that is true. So yeah, the next couple of months are certainly going to be interesting in terms of the Middle East and the election. I think they are very much connected. Which brings me on to my final point, which is the halfway point. The halfway point between the solstice and the equinox. And we can set up a chart for this exact point where the sun is exactly at 15 degrees Leo. So this is the point. You can see that the sun is exactly at 15 Leo. And I'm suggesting this is an important moment, that precise moment where the sun is halfway between the solstice and the equinox, which takes place October the 7th, which is sort of Wednesday. Well, I'm recording this on a Wednesday, so where I am, it's the same day. It actually took place early in the morning, 1:09:03 a.m. And the impact of this event may last for 6 weeks, may last until the autumnal equinox if in the northern hemisphere. So it could last for some time. And so the question is, what impact is this going to have on the world? Well, this is the chart set for the UK. And so set for the UK, the sun is exactly on the IC. I mean, it's sun on the IC. I mean, I suppose you could look at what's happening in the UK at the moment. It's something very fundamental. I suppose we would very much have to look at what midpoints the sun is on at the time of this event. Don't worry, this is relevant to Kamala Harris in the end. Looking at the midpoints that the sun is on. I mean, the closest midpoint is. It's on the moon Kronos midpoint. I suppose that could be government trying to retake control of the situation. Moon Kronos, of course, can be women in power. That is one way of looking at it. Moon Kronos. Kronos is about authority, and so Moon Kronos maybe about women trying to assert themselves. I mean, that is a possibility. And I suppose you could see this with Kamala, and the moon is on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. The moon is square the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, so it's quite a hectic time, and certainly in terms of the UK, this may be a new beginning where the government tries to reassert itself. Maybe the riot season will calm down, but I didn't really want to talk about the UK. I wanted to actually look at this chart from the perspective of the US. So the big event coming up in August is later in the month is the Democratic National Convention, which starts on August the 19th of this month. So what I thought would be fun to do would be to relocate this chart for Chicago and to, see what happens. And so if we relocate this chart from London to Chicago, and this chart matters, and notice in this chart that Pluto is rising. That's the first point. Notice also that Uranus is on the descendant. So Kamala Harris may have believed that by choosing Tim Walz rather than Josh Shapiro, she has somehow avoided turmoil. She's somehow managed to get round the problem. But still, set for Chicago, this is quite a difficult chart with Uranus on the IC and Pluto on the ascendant. So I'm unconvinced that nothing will happen at the time of a DNC conference. And I which goes back to my working hypothesis that things are going to be great for Kamala. She's got her now VP pick until the DNC 2024. I've got this hunch at the moment that things will start to fall apart for the Democrats after the DNC convention, or perhaps during the DNC convention. And this is supported, by the way, by the full moon. This is a full moon I'll be looking at a lot more of over the next few weeks. This is a full moon which takes place at the time of the DC convention. And the key thing about this full moon is sun and moon are exactly opposition each other. Remember, the moon is exactly on the United States' moon, and Uranus is square the sun and the moon. So that's the chart reset. That's the chart set for Westminster. And if we relocate that full moon to Chicago, we get Uranus on a descendant. And okay, it's not exactly on a descendant, but I kind of think it's sort of close enough. And particularly when you link the chart I've just looked at, the midpoint between the solstice and the equinox, and you have Uranus on the IC. I think that this DNC convention is when everything changes, I think. But it's close now. It's less than a fortnight away. Okay, that's all I've got to say on Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and Josh Shapiro. Thank you very much for listening. And if you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed, of course, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.